Hi everyone, it's great to have you here. I'm Waki and today we'll be learning how to make this beautiful long wrap skirt. It's a very easy one, so at the end of the day you'll be able to make one for yourself. If you find this video helpful, please do not forget to like, subscribe and comment. Feel free to ask any questions. Thank you. Let's move straight into today's tutorial. For this project, you need your basic long skirt pattern. I've drafted mine and that's what I'll be using for this tutorial. Ankara fabric about 2.5 to 3 yards. Zip. Lining fabric about 1.5 to 2 yards. Stay. Half yard is okay for this project. To understand the basic concept of this skirt, I'm going to make simple illustrations to explain. The skirt is made up of 3 different parts: the front, the back and the wrap. So for the front has one part of the overlap. One side is going to be long and the other short, and a diagonal line connects 2 of them. Then for the second part, which is the back, the back will have the zip allowance at the center. One part of the skirt is going to be long to complete the long side of the front pattern, while the other side will be short to also complement the short parts of the other side. The third part of the skirt is the wrap. The wrap is made up of 2 parts, the front and the back. The front part is going to overlap the front part of the skirt to have that V shape. Please look closely as I'm drafting it. But it's not going to start from the upper part. It's going to slope a bit. Since it's a wrap, it's not sewn to the skirt directly. The back part of the wrap is going to complete the back pattern of the skirts, so you don't have one side being long while the other is short. Let's move over to the skirt pattern so that we can make our skirts. I decided to make the front wrap. I just went up from my knee line 2 inches and connected this line to the edge of my skirt. You don't have to get to the edge, you can just mark about 2 to 3 inches away from the edge and connect that line. I changed my mind later and decided to go up by 4 inches. So from that point, I'm just folding it down to the edge of my skirts. I'm going to be using only one pattern for this project, but if you have the luxury of paper, you can cut it out at this point. So just fold it if you do not want to use a lot of paper like I did. My next move is placing that pattern paper on my Ankara material so that I'll be able to cut this front part out. I didn't add seam allowance to my skirts pattern, so I'll be pinning first and adding that before cutting. But before you do so, fold down your darts. Except you want to have a dart in your skirt, but it's not necessary for this particular kind of skirt. So I'm folding my pattern and pasting it using my masking tape. I'm adding 2 inches seam allowance at the side, half an inch at the wrap side, and 2 inches at this other side. When I'm done, I'm going to connect these lines and cut it out. When you are done with the cutting, notch at the center to serve as your reference line. With that, the first part of our skirt is done. For the back parts, if the short part of the front was on the right side, you are going to draft the short part on the right side, and same for the long side. If the long side was on the left, you draft it on the left side. I'm arranging my fabric at this point and I'm going to add seam allowance at the center. I'm using 2 inches and I'm going to mark it through my fabric and join it with my ruler. I've gone ahead to fold my pattern into 2 before placing on the fabric and cutting it out. I've marked the points I used to overlap the front of my skirt, which was 4 inches from the knee line. So just measure 4 inches from that knee line upwards, or whatever point you used. That will be the length of your short skirt parts. Mine was about 15 inches. I've added seam allowance at the side, and all is left is cutting out from the fabric. For the short skirt parts, I've gone ahead to cut the entire length. Like I said, mine was about 15 inches. Right now I'm arranging my fabric, the front and the back. You can see how it comes together. We are done with the back and the front, so we are going to draft the wrap. We are starting with the front part of the wrap. You notice the first part was on the left hand side, so the wrap part will be on the right hand side. So on the hip line, I'm measuring 2 inches from the side. I'm going to mark this point. Then I've come down from the top edge of the fabric by 1 inch. I've connected these 2 lines together, and I'm going to fold from that point to the 1 inch that I came down by before I proceed to fold it to the edge of my skirt. This will give me the front wrap. Tucking the edges well before placing to cut. I forgot to mention while we were cutting the other side, when you want to cut this pattern on your fabric, make sure it's aligning with the straight grain of the fabric. I'm now placing the wrap pattern on the fabric, and I'm going to add seam allowance as always, 2 inches at the side and ½ inch at the wrap parts before cutting out. The front part of my wrap is ready, and I'm proceeding to cutting the back parts. To make this very easy for us, just use the long piece of the back pattern and place it right sides together to cut it out. This will give you the exact piece desired. I'm making a simple arrangement to show you how the skirt will come together. This is the back part, both the long and the short, and then the front blends with the long and the short parts respectively. For the wrap, after joining the front and the back parts of the wrap, the back parts will be sewn on the short parts of that zip to complete the back skirt, and the front part just overlaps and has a wrapped effect. I've gone ahead to cut out the lining pieces for all the parts of the skirt I cut out earlier. The only difference is that the lining pattern was 1 inch shorter than the main fabric, with the exception of the short skirt parts. That particular one, I cut it the exact same way with the Ankara fabric. To join the lining piece to the Ankara fabric, start by sewing first at the edge before adjusting it to the top part. Do not sew the wrap part yet. I'll explain how to go about that later. As you can see, I'm done with the joining of the lower parts, so I'm just going to adjust the lining now to the top, and I'll be sewing the zipper allowance side and the other side. I'll leave the top part open so that I'll be able to turn on my fabric. I'm repeating same for the other side, with the exception of the front and back parts of the wrap. I'm done sewing, and all I have to do is to notch and turn out the fabric. This is the short skirt piece. I told you earlier that I'm cutting the lining and the Ankara fabric using the same measurement. Once you are done turning over the front and the back parts, just place them right sides together and sew using the seam allowance you had left. It's time for the front and back wrap pattern. I used a stay to line this front part. Remember, I came down from the top edge by 1 inch, so I'm just going down at the back side, and I've ended it at the seam allowance. So we are going to stitch the Ankara parts, both the front and the back, separately, the lining too separately. I've pinned the fabric down, and all is left is sewing on my sewing machine. I'm done sewing using the sewing allowance I left, so I'm going to cut out the excess. I know the size of my skirt, but what I recommend is ironing. Just open it up and iron. If you cut it this way, it might be difficult to adjust if you grow bigger. I just prefer to do it this way. When I'm done sewing, I'm going to place the lining fabric on the Ankara fabric and match the sides before sewing. I'm going to sew the edge, the wrap, the top part, and the zip allowance side. Just leave a little room at the zip allowance side so that you'll be able to turn out your fabric. I have this space left, so I'm going to fold in 1/2 inch at both sides and stitch it down. As you've correctly observed, I carved out the red print from my fabric and used it to decorate the edge of my fabric. Our skirt is almost done at this point, so this is my front and back. I'm going to show you how to sew this to have your desired result. Just add the back parts of your wrap pattern as I'm doing here. Just add it to that short skirt pattern and pin it down. When I'm done pinning it down, it's time to attach my band. Fold the band and notch at the center. I'm going to place that center point on the center of my skirt pattern and pin it down. My band is 3 inches by my waist measurement plus about 2 inches long. I'm cutting that excess out. So before sewing the band, I'm going to turn it over and sew so that I will not have any raw edges. I'm going to repeat same for the other side. After sewing the band, I moved ahead to sewing my zip allowance, and I added my zip as well. So I'm done with the skirt. It's left for the finishing. There are 2 options for the finishing of this zip allowance. It's either you use the hemming gum and gum the fabric, or you use your thread and needle to tack those edges together neatly. I'm going to tack to show us how to do it. Once I'm done, I'll use hemming gum on the other side. When tacking, just sew on the lining fabric. Do not sew on the main fabric so that it does not show on the other side. Just follow through carefully. Once done, move over to the side and tack it properly so that the fabric does not show on the other side while you'll be rocking your outfit. The last part is attachment of the fastener to the skirt. So just adjust your skirts. Make sure the sides match with the side of the wrap. Then note that point and sew your fastener on it. You can always weigh it as well. Look at the mirror, then use your chalk to mark, remove it and sew. My skirt is finally done. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.